So it is an absolute pleasure this evening to be hosting an online launch for Dom Conlon and Anastasia Izlesou, because we are going to be celebrating the launch of Grow Tree Grow. Of course, this is only, oh, look at that, well prepared. Here's one you made earlier. Of course, it's one book in the Wild Wanderers series. We're going to start this evening by looking in depth at Grow Tree Grow, and I'm going to be talking to Dom about his writing. And then we're going to be treated to some of the images from within the book and to have an opportunity to look at Anastasia's work in progress. We're also going to dip in briefly to the other books in case you haven't come across them yet, although I'm sure you have. And we will be ending our online launch this evening with a reading of Blow, Wind, Blow. So you're going to get two readings this evening. As always, we're really keen to take audience questions, and I'll be pausing at various places through the evening to give you the opportunity to ask questions. And if you'd like to do that, and I'm sure you will, please use the chat facility and I will pick your questions up from there. So both of you, first of all, welcome. We need to put Anastasia in the spotlight along with you, Dom, so that we can see the stars of the show. And I don't know, just generally to kick us off, what does it feel like to be launching the fifth book in this series? And did you think it was going to grow to 5 books? I know there are more to come.
There's more to come. No, and it's a weird thing because they were launched in the pandemic and that weird black hole of time that's happened to us all. And so it seems like yesterday and a million years ago at the same time. It's a weird kind of feeling for me, the whole past 2 years. And yeah, to get to number 5 already, it's amazing. And it's wonderful holding. So I've got them all here, and it's just a nice kind of, it's holding all 12 in a like 3 years time will be extraordinary.
We're going to review all of those books, as I said, a little bit later on. Obviously, Dom, you are a poet, and we know your poetry collection as well, This Rock, That Rock. Anastasia, perhaps I could just ask you as a sort of warm-up question this evening, what you were doing before you started working on this project.
Well, nothing important, to be honest, existing. But in all seriousness, I have only illustrated one book before working with Dom, and that was Nicola Davis' White Hair. And that's kind of how we started working with Dom as well in the end.
Yes, because it was the hair that started it off. And of course, there's the Welsh connection there with the publisher and Nicola's work as well. Well, as I say, we'll come back to you in a little while, if that's all right, Anastasia. We're going to start with the reading of the book, and I'm going to invite Dom to do that. But I'm just going to, if you don't mind, get the PDF of the book online so that people can actually see the images as you're reading. So let's have a look. And hopefully everybody can see this. Can you see that?
Yes.
Perfect.
A beautiful end papers. Anastasia's famous for her wonderful end papers. I think I look forward to them more than anything else. I go, what's she doing with the end papers this time?
Really?
I don't know how to feel about that.
No, seriously, I think they're wonderful. Everybody says it's just a real treat. There's something about end papers that it's just wonderful.
They set the tone, don't they, for the book that's to come. Yeah. So let's move through.
Right, so I shall get started. So yes, this is Grow Tree Grow, and it's by me and Anastasia. And we'll go. Groundbreaker, air taster. Tree pushes its way through the soil. Some seedlings are sprinters, whilst an oak lumbers on. as the bluebell's blue mist hugs the wood. But the sun brings out more than a thin stalk of green, and danger sniffs at the soil. A deer stumbles near, wanting trees' new leaves, hungry now winter has thawed. One bite and tree would be gone, but a bang in the air startles the doe, and she flees like a wisp of red smoke. So is the forest now safe? Can tree grow in peace? No. There are beetles and caterpillars. There are rabbits and ants, and each needs food to survive. But branch is to sky, as root is to earth, so grow tree, grow. Grow slow, but grow strong, ring by ring and year after year, adding shoots to lengthening limbs. Here come the squirrels, woodpeckers, bats, spiders and badgers and birds. Tree is mother and father, a canopy garden, a sanctuary for all to share. In this forest of beech, chestnut and ash, tree is a friend amongst friends, and each plays its part in cleaning the air. Each is a world of its own, and branch is to sky as root is to earth, so grow tree, grow. There's a change in the air, and trees' branches bow with acorns, their hats fitted tight. In each acorn a seed with just enough food to feed on if it should take root. But acorns are tasty for others around, and so tree must make many more. The seasons fly by in russets and greens, with trees' buds making sense of the world. They look, feel and smell for the things tree must do to help it rise up and stay strong. For branch is to sky, as root is to earth, so grow tree, grow. Tree catches the sunlight with leaves outstretched like hands, whilst roots drink deep from the earth. It's time to let acorns grow wild and then fall, as the pigs are brought in to get fat. These snufflers and trotters are harmless enough, but with them comes something tree fears. Now people are here, turning trees into towns, and the forests have started to shrink. Chop, chop, and crash, crash. All over the world, the forests have started to shrink. From that brief breath of green, all those long years ago, to the wrinkles and grooves in its skin. Trees growing older, it's losing its crown. Its heartwood is starting to fade. 1,000 years have passed through trees' leaves. Empires have bloomed and died. And artists and poets have lived out their lives, some leaning on tree's broad trunk. But tree is to fall, as life is to death. So rest, tree, rest. Tree lies on the ground in a slumber which breathes new life to mushrooms and insects and more, like a thin stalk of green which snips at the sky, because tree is to life as sun is to day. So grow, world, grow.
I won't go into the tree facts. We can perhaps cover some of that in our discussion. So, so many things to pick up there to get us going. And I wanted to start because when I first saw the title Grow Tree Grow, I thought that this was going to be, you know, a book about plants and how they grow. And then I realized it's about, of course, it's a bit about that. It's a bit about that, but it's about so much more. You know, it's growing and ecology and the circle of life. And so it's much richer than just a biological account, really, of how trees grow. Tell us a little bit about, after writing about animals and the wind and the sun, why the tree was the next thing to capture you, your imagination, and how you decided to approach it in that way.
tree was difficult, and what I always want to do with the Wild Wanderers is to try and get a broad canvas of the entire world. And so we went from hares to shark, to the wind. So I want to kind of like do this journey across everything about life, just as the whole point of hare was to show that the word hare is not just one thing, it's many things. There's lots of different species of hare, and that was the premise of the entire series. And so I knew I wanted to kind of talk about, nature. It's not just one thing, it's so diverse and so interdependent. When I talk about this, any of the books, you have to talk about how connected things are and how similar things are. So we have, I talk about how hares live in a farm, a scrape in a field or land, but that bunny rabbits have a burrow, and we talk about why that is with children. We talk about how bunny rabbits take longer because they come out of their mums less developed than hares. Then they need that extra protection. So then when we go to shark, we find certain sharks do the same thing. They give birth within the mangrove forests, and that's another form of burrow. So it's about protection. So we can see similarities. Nature's solving the same problem in the same ways, more or less, in trying to protect it. And so I love this kind of thing. And so the whole idea is to show how diverse it is. And so that's why I think we've got butterfly will be next. I know we've got one about water. So it's not just animals, it's this incredible, planet that's not, life appeared on Earth 4 billion years ago and became everything that we see. It is a kind of extraordinary kind of thing, that it's not, not just one creature, but hundreds of thousands and millions of creatures. So tree was just another kind of stage in that process.
It's very rich, and of course it's also history, and it's human history too in there. And I think because of that richness, I noticed Di Parker's written in the chat that it's so moving. And of course that is the words, but it's also the depth of the ideas that you're exploring through the words as well. Was it always going to be an oak tree? I mean, an oak tree is very iconic, but you don't say oak tree. Was that Anastasia, or did you know that it was an oak tree in your head?
I think I knew it was an oak tree because when I was researching, I mean, there's so many remarkable things about trees. I think the reason it was one tree as well was because, unlike the other books, we're not going around the world in this one. So I had to kind of fix it in place for this. So that's why we go through time rather than around the world. But the oak tree is remarkable simply because of the number of species that it nurtures, that reside on it. It's an ecosystem in itself. Something like well over 180 different species can rest in one oak tree. And these things, can live up to 1,000 years old, and the mother and father thing, and they're an entire world, and it's incredible kind of thing. And I'm sure, a tree expert will be able to say, well, actually, this tree is even more remarkable, and that's fine. But the oak it just appealed to my kind of sense of poetry for that reason, really. Incredible.
I know you explained this in your note at the end, but we didn't read that. Tell us about the mother and father aspect of it.
So it's this thing. The reason I refer to it as it is, I was trying they them, and I know this is a kind of very a new awareness that everybody's getting about pronouns, which is great. And it was interesting to kind of explore that within the oak tree, because it's both. It uses itself to seed itself and to grow. So it's I know some trees don't do that. Some trees need a male and a female tree kind of next to each other. And they take each other out to dinner and do all the other things.
Of course they do.
Mummy and daddy trees do. And but so this was just another reason for, wow, what an incredible tree it is. And not far from where I live, there's a wonderful country park, and I was there. I've been there so many times over the years when I was writing it, but then I was there about a month ago, and suddenly the oak trees have just really taken root. They've spread. These new ones coming up on paths that I used to walk along before the pandemic. So it's incredible.
So I was interested in some places in your text, the lack of specificity. I'm saying that as a positive thing. So, for example, danger sniffs at the soil, but you don't say what it is. Is that because you're deliberately leaving space for the illustration? And are you giving some direction as to how that needs to be addressed or not?
No, Anastasia talk about this a lot. I learned many years ago to just stay out of the way of illustrators and let them do their own thing, because it's not my book, it's our book, and it's not just mine and Anastasia's either. It's Peter and Matthew and the team at Graphic as well, and Joanna's, the designer, and I want that to be open, and they can all use this kind of premise that we've all set up to tell their own story and explore what nature means to them, because you don't just want one old bloke's perspective on this at all. You want kind of like everybody's perspective on it, and that's what makes it richer, I think, anyway. I mean, so Anastasia, interestingly, and she doesn't know this, she's interpreted something, a detail of what I wrote in a completely different way, and I didn't expect it, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. I don't know whether to tell you, but
you must tell us. Was it that bit, danger sniffs at the soil?
No, because I think that bit, because the next spread talks about the deer.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, so no, but it's on that page. So it's the bang in the air startles the doe, and Anastasia's got this amazing thunderstorm.
yes.
But that was, I wasn't even thinking of a thunderstorm. I was thinking the crack of a gun.
Yeah, now that you've said that.
Bambi kind of thing. And honestly, I'm glad I didn't say that in an illustrator note, because I think that drama in the sky, again, ties back to Blow Wind Blow. And it just, I love it. I absolutely love it. So yeah, and another reason why writers should stay out of the way of illustrators.
Yeah. Now, tell us a little bit about the form that you write in. So I noticed that the rhythm is very important, and sometimes you use rhyme, but it's not a consistent and regular rhyme. And of course, your characteristic kennings are in there as well. And as you know, that was my maiden name, Kenning, so I love to see a good kenning in a poem. But tell us a little bit about how you approach that process, and whether the form for this, because there are 5 books in, whether it needs to stay the same or whether you approach each book as a unique thing.
There's a certain rhythm I hear with these books, and it changes, like you say, when I bring rhyme in occasionally, and I'll bring it in. I think rhyme is a really powerful tool. My thing about poetry, I know somebody's asking about top tips for writing poetry, and I'll go into that later, but my big thing about writing poetry is that poetry has tools, not rules. And I think with all these tools, you've got to be really careful and selective about when you use them. Use a kenning selectively, use rhyme especially, because rhyme can lull you to sleep. It can make you forget the words, but then thrown in a certain way, or done with a kind of to kind of shock you from another rhythm, I think it can be really effective. And so I wanted to use, I do hear a rhythm with all these books, and I know I have a certain pattern, and I think they all follow that, and I like that. I like the fact that it's this natural rhythm of writing that I'm hoping reflects the natural world around me, but then to throw in certain things that that are perhaps reminiscent of the forest, of the, you know, the onomatopoeia of the crash and the bang and things like that, and to bring those in. So it's about being kind of selective, but still within the framework. So to give you an example, with the butterfly book, that's out, the next one that'll be coming along, that Anastasia's working on. And I wrote about half the book entirely in rhyme, and it sounded really good. And I thought, this is lovely. It's a beautiful form, and it worked and it fitted, but it just didn't feel part of the series. It felt wrong somehow. And so I just kind of sadly just screwed up the paper, threw it into the corner of the room and sobbed for a while, and then started again. And I was right. It wouldn't have been. These do have a certain style because it's just the way they feel right, I think.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I hope you rescued that piece of paper, because it might be a poem on its own.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I rarely keep. Some people say things about, I really enjoyed such a poem. I go, did I write that? I didn't know that.
I agree that the sort of too much predictability can stop you taking notice. But would you also say, because like listening to you read it and you know the words really well, and you really hear that rhythm coming through, do you think it's important that, you know, if we're sharing a book and reading it aloud to a group or a class, that we find that rhythm for ourselves rather than just pick the book up and start? It seems to me that's a much more successful experience.
I think reading aloud is just the greatest thing we can do, and as writers, it's the best thing we can do, because I've written things. So I've got a book of poetry out next year with somebody else. A pair of us have written a series of poems each, and I went through a lot of the poems after about a year of not looking at them, and I'd not read them out loud. And I read them out loud, and I was like, these are dreadful. These are really poor. And so again, just kind of more screwed up paper in the corner of the room and starting again. And because you don't always follow your own rules, do you? You kind of get into a method and you go, no, I'm writing. And it becomes so insular that the voice in your head doesn't work. And so reading them out loud, and these books absolutely have to be read out loud. And I will read them out after I've read things. And I've read pages before, and I thought, that's not working. And when they come through on draft as well, which is great, because again, it'll be about maybe 6 months or even longer sometimes since I've read it, I can read it out loud. And if I can't fall into a rhythm, I realize I've written it wrong to start with. So yeah, I think everybody should read it out loud. It's a treat to read any book out loud. You know, even a few sentences from a novel. I know it's probably more difficult to read an entire novel out loud, but to read the sentences out loud teaches you so much.
I'd say read it to the cat and find the you know, there's this idea of finding the rhythm as you're reading, and you know, your confidence growing through that. So I mean, I read to all sorts of inanimate objects when I'm practicing. Anyway, it brings me to another question, which is about throwing things away. You've already said you've thrown whole poems away, but I wondered, with this book, Grow Tree Grow, whether you had to discard some well-loved lines in the interests of the overall poem.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd be able to give you an example of what, but it went through quite a lot of drafts, because it's finding the heart of the story in each one. And even though they're very simple stories, these aren't plot-driven, you know, suddenly another tree walks in, or an axe cutter and things like that. And it's there's still a story, there's still a reason for the tree's life, or for hare's life, or for shark's life. And to find that takes a lot of effort, because it's a lot of research to get the facts in front of you, and then to look at that and see what kind of speaks to me most. And with this one, I think it went through quite a number of drafts. And I'm a member of the Society I can never remember this, the SCUBY, Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. There we go, I remembered it. And it's a brilliant organization because everybody in my crit group are just fantastic. Their analysis is much better than mine. And they will go, oh, I'm not sure this is working, I'm not sure work. And I don't do this with all the books, with some of them though, I have done. And Tree was one of those. And it was really useful to hear their feedback and see what wasn't working. Because I think originally I was trying to squeeze in more mentions of other trees, because it is, like I said before, the diversity of tree species on the planet is incredible. And there's things that you want to mention, the sequoia, wow, and the maple, and so many other trees that you think these are extraordinary life forms, but you can't, because you realize actually I can't shoehorn every tree possible, or even a number of them. I have to be careful on how I do that. So I stripped all that out and focused on this.
I think you just mentioned them in the context of the forest habitats and the trees that would be around the oak tree.
Yeah.
And then it feels natural to that environment that you've created. I have got some questions coming in, and I'm going to come back to that because Kelly's question I think will fit well after we've heard from Anastasia. But can I just invite everybody else who's joined us, if you would like to ask some questions, please do put them in the chat. I'm making notes as we go along, and we will make sure that we give you the opportunity for your questions to be asked. But shall we have a look at some pictures, Dom? Shall we?
Yes.
Okay, so let's bring Anastasia up.
This is the main course of the evening.
No. It's 2 equal courses, without a doubt.
I'm
so,
more of a pudding.
Thanks so much for joining us as well today. And we've got some pictures to look at, some slides, and we've also got some fascinating time lapse that you took earlier on today. I've been really thrilled watching that this afternoon. Shall we just get the pictures up and we can start talking about them, and you can tell us more about them?
Yeah, of course.
So. Okay, so I'm going to take my cue from you, but because I'm dreadful, I interrupt people when I want to know things. So if you start talking, you might find I interrupt you and ask you questions as we go along. So what have we got here? This is the bluebell spread.
Oh, this is different spreads. So this is kind of the beginning stage of me working on a book. I jump around the spreads all the time in the beginning because I try to find out how they work together as well. And sometimes I also don't have like particular ideas of how I want something to work, and I find something later on, which is quite hard when I have to send that to Peter from Graphic, explaining that, oh no, I worked on the spread number 2 and then number 11 and then number 6, but it may change. So that's kind of how I started gathering ideas for the spreads that already sort of have a vision. So I think the starting spread, the bluebell one in the bottom right corner, that one, the idea came straight away after reading Dom's words. This whole image of the sheltered oak sapling in between the bluebells, and some things like the rabbit spread, it changed a lot through the course of work, but this is kind of what I started with. And then one of the spreads was one of the most difficult, I think, for me to work in a book. It was the one describing the badgers and bats and woodpeckers and spiders in a tree. And it was so rich that I really didn't know where to start with that and how to fit it all in. So it's, by the way, the one in the bottom left corner. So the first image that came to my mind, probably because I really love bats, was the bats in the tree. So I decided I would start with that. And then later on, that hole in the tree ended up in the spread, but I just would grow and grow and grow the surroundings from there, just adding more elements. So yeah, there is no pattern in my work.
And the top right, which spread is that?
Oh, I think that was me exploring the spread where empires have died and poets have been under the tree. So one of the ideas I thought of was, you know, those London cemeteries where they have old trees that are untouched, and the whole cemeteries are just like this little almost national parks in between the city dotted around, and how there are always graves of poets and artists and everyone else. But then through the time, more people come through them because they're just really nice places to be in. So I kind of started exploring it with the whole cemetery idea, plus with the whole theme of the tree dying. It felt sort of appropriate. And then it ended up being this massive spread of buildings and all of the things happening around. But yeah, that's where it began.
What was the reason behind that change? Was that something that you decided, excuse me, or was it a discussion?
With this change, I think I tried to find the solution that sort of works in the beginning. But I never wanted to just sort of work. I wanted to be good and good enough for me, which it never is. But I try to get as close as possible to that. So I just try to experiment until it feels right, in a sense. Like, for example, with this London cemetery thing, it was just too static, I think, for me. And yeah, so I wanted to explore more ideas, and Dom's words were so rich that I knew I wanted to put more elements in that. So I tried to explore the ways of how I could do that. And also as an illustrator, I also have to think in terms of composition of the text placement, just visually. I don't want to like put any important elements that would be covered by text or overlapped, and it should feel like balanced enough. So sometimes the more creative ideas actually come from me just looking at the pagination and trying to work around that, which I kind of enjoy.
Really interesting. And at this stage, are you also thinking about how one page sits alongside the pages that lie either side of it? Because it seems to me that when I turn the page of these books, there are plenty of surprises for my eye that I don't feel that I'm looking at the same thing page after page. For instance, the page with the rabbits on the black background, really, you know, it just grabs your attention when you think about the page that's gone before it. So is that part of what you're doing here?
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm at the sketch stage and the coloring stage, I constantly look through the previews of all pages and sweep them around, because I also think about just the way the physical book is read as flipping page, what way it goes. So with the rabbits, I want to show that movement progressing from page to page and have that kind of visual flow to it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And while I want each spread to be kind of different enough, I also want to be at the same time cohesive throughout the book. So yeah, that's something I also spend lots of time balancing and missing deadlines with.
Tell us what maybe we'll move on to the next image, but while we're doing that, that idea of cohesion and cohesiveness, what are the elements that make this a cohesive book?
Well, I hope it does make a cohesive
It does,
book.
but I wondered what the elements are that you decided make it so.
Well, with Tree Book, I think it was a bit easier because it stays in technically one place, even though the place itself changes. And we have the tree, which is kind of the same tree growing through its phases. So that alone already ties it up a lot. So with this book, there is a slide with me exploring color palette, and it's definitely the colors because
should I move on to that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
There we are.
Yeah, so I knew because it was a forest and trees that there definitely would be greens and browns and ochre hues. And I knew that there would be a lot of that. So I already had a starting base from there. And then I started to think what would complement that. And I often go also through things that inspire me. And a lot of the times it's medieval paintings and the Persian miniatures and things like that. And they have a lot of Persian and Indian miniatures with this beautiful blue colors with the trees. And I thought it worked so well. So I wanted to incorporate that as well, because it was just felt really natural to that. And then, yeah, the repeated elements of trees and branches and roots where I kind of wanted to sort of mirror Dom's text as well, where branches to sky as root is, basically where branches are compared with roots. So I wanted to kind of rhyme the images with those words as well throughout the book where I deemed it appropriate.
It's interesting because I picked that line out too. It gives it a kind of feeling of incantation, branches to sky as root is to earth. And it's interesting as the illustrator, you've kind of picked up that line in particular.
Like if you turn the tree upside down, it totally makes sense. So yeah, I was basically traveling on those spreads in different places of the tree, kind of like, when you first lay on the ground and look at it, and then sometimes you look into the bark and explore what's inside, and then you climb up the tree and see what's in the branches, or maybe you're somewhere above the tree and see the whole picture. So while the elements stay the same, I guess our perspective on them doesn't. So I think that's how I tried to make it more visually interesting at the same time.
I also thought, I think Dom's words where he talks about the wrinkles in the tree, and then I was looking at your illustration, and it immediately made me make connections between the old tree and old people. And you can almost see that in the tree's wrinkles, like people when they age, and there's something really wonderful about that. I love the way also that you talk about warm blues, because it really annoys me when people just say that blue is a cold colour.
No.
Right, so we've got one more, I think, haven't we?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, maybe not. Let me just... no, maybe there isn't another one that way, is there? Oh, there is, yes.
Oh yeah, the cover iterations. That went through some changes through the process. And the one we finished up with was almost the last minute decision, actually, because at the beginning, I thought of making it a tree on the cover. And I went through quite a detailed sketch of it in the end, as you can see. But then when I started coloring it, I realized that whatever I did, even though I really liked the outlines of it, whenever I added color, it just looked like a giant stalk of broccoli to me, and I hated that. And I think Peter from Graphic also wasn't in awe of this, because we were going through different color palettes and it was a long back and forth. And I really just didn't want to even work on it because I think it looked so much like just a static broccoli. And then I was, after a few cries probably, just realizing that the whole book is about the life that happens in the tree, and that maybe I want to show that close up in, and that would be like the main idea. So I thought about the squirrel spread that we had, and I thought that that would look really good visually. And I remember it was really late in the evening, and I made some drafts, really excited about it, thinking that, well, either it's a great idea, it's a horrible idea, but I'll send it anyway. So I sent it and was just like, I think this is much better thing to do with a cover. And I'm really glad that Peter agreed with me on that
it's
one.
Wonderful. And it's so rich, you know, that red squirrel gives it such a wonderful richness. So have we got another? Yes. Oh, this wonderful spread, which we paused on at the end because there's no words. And there's one of the things that I notice in this, because it's easy to sort of wax lyrical about nature. And you've done it so subtly, the way that you've hidden a few plastic bottles in there for us to find.
Thank you. There's one personal joke with a bag that the fox carries. For 5 years, the view from my window was the Mega Pizza Kebab shop. And it just became an internal joke between me and my friends. So I thought that there is nothing better than the fox, which I would meet a lot, coming home late at night, carrying a little parcel from there. But yeah, because of how the book is printed and structured, there's always one spread extra left. And it began with hair, where I just I think put in like an extra illustration or something without the words, or maybe it was shock, I don't remember. But yeah, there is this
I think it was as late as Wind when that happened, actually.
With shock it was the map.
Yeah, we had the map.
Yeah, so there is this 13th spread where I think I just take a liberty to continue and give a bit of starting point to how the story goes after that, after what Dom described. Yeah, so that's how this spread came about. And I think it was another spread with this book that I almost instantly thought of. And yeah, so it doesn't differ very much from the initial rough sketch. Yeah,
I love the light that you've captured in this. You know, white flowers at that time of night really show up, don't they? Where everything else is losing its color, the white flowers continue to show up in the sort of half dark, and it does make it really magical. And the lights that you've got in the background of the houses there. And I think in Shine Star Shine, that's again another book where your use of light is just divine. I mean, it's such a visual feast.
Oh, thank you so much.
We're going to have a look now, aren't we, at some time lapse, and it goes quite quickly. So maybe it would be useful just to tell people before I show it what it is that we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, so basically time lapses, these are snippets of the process of my working in kind of real time, but speeded up. And I recorded them at 30 seconds so that people wouldn't get too bored looking through that, because it takes much longer. But you can kind of see, I guess, through them how I explore the ideas on the stage of sketching and how I ditch some and try to find better solutions. And in some of them, I start exploring the color, which changes in the end, in the final book slightly. But yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Okay. Fingers crossed this works. Let's have a look. Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that was the rabbit spread, where initially I thought of the idea of just a giant rabbit, almost unrecognizable, with a big eye looking at it. But later on, I ditched that to the idea of almost either having a multiple rabbits or seeing the same rabbit just traverse through the thing and chewed on it. It's open for interpretation, because I thought that would show the life in the forest and the richness of it much better. So yeah.
Wonderful. I'm going to bring Dom back in and get you side by side. Hopefully this will work. There you are. Two wonderful faces together. And we have got some questions that are starting to come in. In fact, there's one for each of you. So I'm going to start with you, Dom. And Kelly Marshall, Reading Gladiators have been reading Swim Shark Swim. So that's a reading club that we organise at Just Imagine. And she wants to know your top tips for young writers.
I think with poetry, and the reason I think that it's accessible, I think poetry's got this image with adults more than with children, but and that reflects back onto children, that it's inaccessible, that it's something that has to be analysed and deconstructed, and it's quite complex because we've got all these, as I said, these kind of tools, metaphor and simile and everything. So I think that the key thing for children to do with poetry is to be themselves, is to write it in their own view and their own words and use their own voice. So don't be told that you have to use words in a certain order or anything. Actually, throw grammar out of the window completely and just explore. It's what you want to say, and the way you say it is the way you talk. And I think that's, for me, that's what poetry is. It's the personal experience. So that's probably different to verse, which is fine, and verse can be poetry as well. But that, to me, is a tool of poetry that we can choose to lean on it. But at its heart, for me, poetry is about what I want to express about the world and my experience of the world, because that's what's unique. There was I did a summer school last year, and it was for children going into year 7. And I asked them just to write a little bit about themselves, a few lines about themselves. And most of the class got straight to it, and some were exploring, relationships with the grandparents and things like that. And but one lad, he just said, "I've not done anything. I'm 11 years old. Well, what have I done?" And I just said, and he clearly didn't want to engage. And then I said, "I'm willing to bet that you've got some amazing experiences. So tell me about yourself." So he says, "Oh, I don't know. So tell me, parents or anything." He said, "Well, my dad collects old cars." I said, "Right." So I said, I know the answer to this already before you even tell me. How old were you when you first drove a car? He says, "Oh, about 6. I said, "Right." So I've sat in the driver's seat once in a car. I said, "I've not experienced this. This is incredible. You could tell me what it feels like to be 6 years old and holding this big kind of wheel and to go through it." I said, "And this is extraordinary." And he wrote it. It took him about a month after I'd gotten, but he eventually sent it through one of the librarians. And it was just this amazingly short poem about his experience of, and that's poetry. It's done in his way. I could hear his voice. So it's just about using your own voice. And it is about finding that, what do you want to tell us about? Tell us about what, how you feel, basically.
So all about tuning into the child's interests and helping them discover that they do have a voice. And what could be better than that? Of course, we've got lots of ideas coming through here with suggestions for books that you should write, or whether you would consider writing them. So Nicola Cowling asks, would you consider writing one about mountains?
That would be amazing, wouldn't it? yeah, I mean, I'm already thinking now because mountains are formed in such interesting way, and not just the whole Everest ones. There's the ones that are under the ocean, aren't they? Which are, if we measure things from sea level, but if we didn't do that, there's much bigger mountain in the ocean. I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but that goes so deep down, and you know we're getting all, yeah, no, that'd be fun. And then of course my favorite ever mountain is the one on Mars, and so which is like 3 or 4 times bigger than Everest anyway. So yeah, mountains would be great, or continental plates pushing in, and
yeah, it adds, that would add really well to that series, wouldn't it? Thinking about the things that you've done, and then you've got, you know, you've got things like the butterfly that are small, and then you've got the big things in nature too.
No, I love that. I love that.
Oh, so Anastasia, a couple of questions for you. One is about, so I'm going to read this one because it's a long question and it's a very thoughtful question. It's from Emma Carpendale, and she says, some of the illustrations in Grow Tree Grow have an otherworldly kind of feel to them, which I feel works beautifully in the context of the poem, and it helps give the work a timeless quality. Was that a conscious effort on your part, or is it just your style?
Oh, I guess I never considered that they do look otherworldly. So I guess that is part of my style, because when I illustrate Dom's books, I just show basically my own perspective on things and things that interest me personally, and how I perceive them, see them. So yeah, I guess it's just part of the personal style in that way.
I think lighting can add to that, can't it? You know, we talked about the lighting in the end spread, and the lighting with the deer and the lightning itself, that kind of creates another otherworldly feel to it, I think.
I think I don't strive for realistic. Oh,
no, go on, Anastasia. You say what you want to say, and then.
Oh yeah. So basically, what I was going to say, that with these books, I don't strive for like hyper realistic representation of things, because as an illustrator, I have some freedoms to highlight things that I want to through color and tone and everything, and basically therefore put the focus on things I want to put focus on. So I guess that's what might create that feeling. I do look at nature as inspiration, but ultimately, as an illustrator and not a photographer, I don't have the obligation to show it exactly as it is.
Interesting. Dom, what were you going to say?
So Anastasia and I have talked about this before, because when I started to look at her process, I think it was back on Hair probably, I said I just read an article about the background artist, the key background artist for Bambi. And I think I sent you the article, didn't I, Anastasia?
Yeah.
Probably did. And what the artist did, whose name I can't for the life of me remember right off the top of my head, but what the artist did, Disney were really struggling with the detail of the background images. They're going, oh, it's gonna, you know, it's just too much, and we can't. They couldn't get it right. And then this illustrator said, who was, I think, Chinese, yeah, and they said, this is something that I can do, and using impressionism, kind of not impressionism like Monet, but using more Chinese calligraphy and the style to hint at this incredibly rich world as a background. And when you then go back, and this would be an amazing thing to find that article and talk about this in class, in relation to tree especially, I think it comes into focus, and Hair, I think, but certainly with tree, because it's a similar kind of thing that Anastasia does, which I love. Of there is so much. It feels like there's so much. You can smell the air, especially on that last spread, the silent spread. You can smell that kind of evening air that you're walking out where the light is starting to fade. And I think that's something remarkable that Anastasia does. That does have, I think, this wonderfully rich tradition. It's just, the depth of it is incredible.
Mm. We really only have time for one more question. And then I'm just going to pick up some of the observations in the chat. And then, Dom, I think we are going to end, because the time has whizzed away with us. Obviously, I'm letting it run a bit longer because we did start late. We're going to end with a reading. So the question is to Anastasia, and it is, what artists inspired you or do inspire you?
So many. I think I'm just very omnivorous in terms of inspiration. I gather it everywhere I can find. But I guess some of the things I return to again and again are not from particular artists, but rather just old paintings, like medieval paintings, miniatures, Japanese block prints. Sometimes it's textile patterns and things like that. They can inspire me a lot, rather than just looking at some particular artists. And I try to bring a lot of those elements into my own work. But if I'm talking about just illustrators, current and past, then probably it would be Tove Jansson and Edward Gorey, from children's book illustrators, current ones. One of my favorites are Julia Sarda and
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Listening to you talk there, it's interesting. Obviously, Tove Jansson and Gorey both drawing, really important to them. And Julia Sarda, I can see that in, there's something, I think, again, the kind of inspiration from textile and pattern, in a way, they remind me a little bit of William Morris as well. If you look at some of those strawberry thief kind of
images. I love William Morris.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I like to take inspiration a lot from applied arts rather than fine arts a lot of the time. So I visit museums and I like to see just even drawings made not by professional artists. Like there is an artist, his name is Henry Darger, and he has very surreal drawings that he kept just in his desk throughout his life, never showing them to anyone. And they were discovered only after his death, when a janitor was emptying his apartment. But there's so much, something you don't see in the mainstream acclaimed artists things, that I think just makes my brain tick more.
So a couple of observations. I'm going to send the chat to you afterwards, because we don't have time to obviously go through all of these comments, and there's some really interesting things that people have written in the chat. But I'm just going to pick up one because it's another suggestion for things that you might do. And one is the idea of Dye Park, or is Dye from the Haworth, I should say, bookshop. Her suggestion is that you have a colouring book of your illustrations to go along with the book. Anyway, that's probably for your publisher to consider, but there's one of the things there. And also other suggestions, taking away from the natural world, think about things like fireworks, who knows. Don, we're going to come back to you now. Thank you so much for all of those detailed replies to people's questions. We've learnt so much from that. But I'm going to come back to Dom and just ask you to very briefly tell us about the books we haven't mentioned. And then we're going to hear a reading of Blow, Wind, Blow.
So, yeah, I mean, well, it's all kind of all started with Leap Hair Leap, which is a lovely kind of journey around the world and looking at the the many species of hare, or some of the many species of hare, and their habitats and that they live in and the challenges that they face. And then we went on to and this seems to be our favourite to read, with Shark, which is great. And this got me put in touch with an amazing scientist over in Australia called Blake Chapman, who also writes incredible books for children and adults, all about ocean life. So this again looks at different species, introducing that the world and how connected it is, exploring a sort of very different environment. And then after that we went to Blow Wind Blow, which is absolutely beautiful. And this is the one Anastasia mentions about having the kind of first of the. She had a spreadsheet. Do you mind if I just do something with that? Of course, don't mind if you do anything with anything. And it's an absolutely incredible end spread there, which is a story in itself. And I've worked with children who are just learning English, and I just use Anastasia's art to discuss all sorts of things about the world around them. And this is one that they just fixate on and discuss, and it becomes, an entire discussion just in that. And then after that, we have Shine Star Shine. And then obviously Tree after that. But Shine Star Shine, again, another look at this, an incredible, our sun. As we see now with the James Webb Space Telescope, the images that have just come through there, the trillions of stars out there in the universe, and how rich they are and how important they are to our life here, always bringing it down to our experience of the world around us and the universe. Fantastic. So yeah, those are the books. And then Tree.
Ah, lovely. And can I ask you then to close our event this evening with a reading of Blow, Wind, Blow? And just so that everybody who's listening knows, after that, we're going to close our event and say goodnight to everybody, but we're sending you off with a story.
Yes, absolutely. I love this book, Blow, Wind, Blow. And I think I love it for many different reasons. And one of them is definitely the dog that Anastasia built into it. And it's just a wonderful thing, the dog kind of in this story. There we go. I'll try and share the illustrations as well as I read. Lawn prowler, mist parter, like a cat on the hunt. Wind watches clothes on the line. But what can wind do? It's so small and weak. What can it do to be strong? Heat snatcher, pressure catcher, wind borrows strength from the earth. With a huff and a puff, wind bellows a breeze, and the shirt sleeves all cheer in the air. What a wheeze that was. What a blast of good fun. Now wind wants to do it again. Go further, go farther, grow big and grow strong, and blow wind, blow. Curling over fences and into the trees, wind scatters leaves like a sneeze. And when a chirruping chick leaps from a nest, wind's breezy hands help her fly. Then wind plucks a sycamore seed from a tree and helicopters it over the hills. To Holland's stout windmills, which stand like white dresses, grinding down grain for our cakes. There's a flurry of flour, the miller's all white, and wind whistles away with a laugh. Go further, go farther, grow big and grow strong, and blow wind, blow. Wind tickles the rivers, then whoosh onto Paris, sending kites to write notes in the sky. With a boost from a flame, wind fills a balloon like a puffed cheek ready to blow. Two brothers clap hands, make a breeze with a cheer, and a sheep, duck and rooster lift off. Now riding the trade winds, far out to sea, wind slows in the Pacific's doldrums, where it's still, where it's quiet, where the sea is like glass. So go further, go farther, grow big and grow strong, and blow wind, blow. across Thailand and India to Africa's deserts, to blow sandstorms through Chad and Sudan, whilst gazelles race along till they're quite out of breath and a gale for strength builds in wind. Go further, go farther, grow big and grow strong, and blow wind, blow, to the Atlantic's wild ocean with treasures of cloud for pirate ships to fill up their sail. Now the tropical waters are feeding wind's thirst and a hurricane starting to form. It's a cyclone, a typhoon of water and wind, like a genie spinning out of control. Go further, go farther, grow big and grow strong, and blow wind, blow. Wind rushes to Florida, back to the jetties and shores, and the homes all lean back in surprise. There are cars being flipped as roofs peel away and turbulence rattles the air. Wind wants to have fun, but this isn't good. So slow wind, slow. A blast of cold air from the Andes at last helps wind to slowly calm down. And somehow the seed still rides on its back and now flutters and settles into Amazon soil like a flag on a newly found moon. Then creeping and peeping, wind shuffles down streets in search of somewhere to rest. But doors all slam shut and coats huddle up and everyone says, go wind, go. Just catching, wisp-biting dog in a car invites poor wind into his fur. And together they ripple and soar along roads, shouting, blow, wind, blow.